Kentucky basketball continues to roll through summer practices without their full squad, and there's one guy that has made his mark that I think we are heavily undervaluing, not for the future of this program, but for this season.
You are Locked On Kentucky, your daily podcast on the Kentucky Wildcats, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, what's going on, Big Blue Nation? Welcome on into Locked On Kentucky, your daily Kentucky Wildcats podcast. I'm your host, Lance Dawe, and on today's episode of Locked On Kentucky, we are going to talk about a player that I think is more than likely being undervalued, and it's not for the trajectory of his development. It's not for him being a multi-year player that could pan out down the road. I'm talking about this season, a freshman that I think could make an impact on this year's team. Also on today's episode, we've gotten into the offseason, and I feel like there's no better time than to talk about some lists, some rankings, give you guys my thoughts on a look back at some NCAA tournament games that Kentucky has participated in. My personal 5 favorite NCAA tournament games since the beginning of the John Calipari era, and I would love for you guys to drop yours in the comments below. I got some feedback on Twitter that was essentially saying you could just put the entire 2014 run, which I think is fair, but this is going to be my personal 5 favorites, and I hope you guys agree with at least most of the list. I think there's going to be a couple that maybe you disagree with. Thank you guys so much for making Locked On Kentucky your first listen every single day. Want to remind everyone out there that we are free and available on all platforms. If you're not subscribed on YouTube, trying to get to 20,000 subs before the beginning of college basketball season, would love it if you did so. And if you have not subscribed on the podcast feed, would love it if you did there as well. All right, let's go ahead and get into it. So I think that we are undervaluing, and I think heavily undervaluing, what Braydon Hawthorne could bring to the table this upcoming season. This is not a trajectory for, well, if he puts on muscle, maybe in year 2 or 3, he becomes one of the best players in the SEC. This is not, this kid has crazy NBA upside for several years down the road. I'm talking right now, and I think there are a couple of different things that we could point to that could indicate maybe Hawthorne is more impactful than we currently anticipate. And a lot of it has to do with kind of what we've seen throughout the course of these highlight videos that Kentucky has been posting on social media, which, by the way, just to pause here at the beginning, I hope you guys saw the way that the scrimmage that they posted ended, where whichever team won got Kobe Yates, ended with a almost full court heave, it looked like, from Malachi Marino, like a 3/4 court heave, to win the scrimmage 15-12 at the buzzer. Incredible, insane shot. I was in shock. They had to review it. He got it off in time. What an incredible post for them to share with us. That was absolutely insane. But Braydon Hawthorne has been making his mark, man, in these highlight videos. He looks like a polished jump shooter. He's got some really impressive athleticism, dunking the ball at the rim. I think that Hawthorne, with his size and his skill set, if Kentucky does maybe have some injury issues like they did a season ago, this kid could get thrown out there and he could be a star. You saw the quote recently where he said, the only way I'm leaving Kentucky is if I get drafted. He's committed to this process, man. He's committed to this university. He's going to be here for, I think, at least 2 seasons, probably 3 if I had to guess, just depending on how things shake up with the rest of the roster, which, by the way, in a future episode of the show later on this week, we are going to talk about what next year's roster could look like. I know a lot of you are kind of freaking out a little bit about Jason Crow Jr. and him more than likely going to Missouri. A crystal ball has been put in over on 24/7 Sports, but I think this staff knows what they're doing. If they get him, awesome. If they don't, you got to really look at next year's roster and start to realize maybe some things are not as desperate as we currently think they are in terms of talent acquisition, which, again, we'll get to that later on this week. But Braydon Hawthorne, you talk about a guy that I think most people agree needs to put on muscle, needs to develop, needs to have several years of collegiate experience in order to fully blossom into the player that we want him to be. I think he has said similar things as well. But I think that you could make the argument that Hawthorne could step up this season at small forward for the Wildcats if things go awry when it comes to injury concerns. The Wildcats, obviously, you can't expect injuries to happen, but the Wildcats last season, at some point you were like, something's got to give. Kentucky has to stop piling up these injuries. You've got to be able to either get some guys back or just have the bleeding stop. And it just kept going and going and going. And I think that's eventually what caused them to run out of gas in the Sweet 16 against Tennessee, is that they didn't have guys like Jackson Robinson out there. They were battling with a ton of different injuries, just either guys that were already out there that had to be out there, or guys that were on the bench that were not going to come back. Kirk Carissa, obviously, being another player that Kentucky could have absolutely used with some outside shooting and some ball handling against that Tennessee team. But Braydon Hawthorne this year, I think, could be somebody like that, where even if you don't have injuries in this non-conference slate, Kentucky's going to have some opportunities to go up against some teams some coaches, I should say, that they saw last year, and they're going to have the opportunity to kind of put their stamp on the matchup again. You're going to be able to go against Gonzaga again. You're going to be able to go against a team like Louisville again, right? But you have to be able to throw some sort of different wrinkle at those teams now that they know what Kentucky is under Mark Pope. And I think Hawthorne's role as another shot creator, a spot-up shooter, somebody that can bring you length and versatility on both ends of the floor, somebody that can shrink the floor whenever you're trying to stop guys from driving to the rim with ease. And again, I know he's not the most physically imposing player at the moment, but still somebody that you can throw out there that can be that extra creator, extra ball handler, I guess I should say. And it may not look like he's capable of doing so just based on what we've seen with his high school tape, but I really do think when you're starting to watch him in some of these practices, he's not a power forward for a reason. This kid has ball handling skills. He's one of the fastest risers in this year's recruiting class, and that's another reason why I think we might see Braydon Hawthorne take off in this year one. Look at his high school trajectory. He went from a no-name prospect to a 3-star prospect to all of a sudden he's got Duke, West Virginia, Virginia Tech, Kentucky on his line trying to offer him enough NIL to come play for them. He ends up choosing Kentucky. There's a reason that the Duke Blue Devils were interested in this kid. There's a reason that West Virginia, a good program that has given Kentucky some great players over the last several years, was interested in this kid. There's a reason that the Wildcats were interested in this prospect. He has, I think, a lot of potential to take off quickly, and you saw that over the course of a year at the high school level. Imagine what he would be able to do underneath Mark Pope in a system that is going to give him spot-up opportunities, is going to give him opportunities to drive to the rim and finish. He's going to have his chances. Against the good teams in the non-con slate, against the bad teams in the non-con slate, I think Braydon Hawthorne could end up proving to be extremely valuable, regardless of whether or not Kentucky has to dive deep into their bench to find guys like him to perform. I think that he could really make his mark in year one. And year two, we're going to talk about it on a future show this week. Kentucky's got a lot of things to be excited about at the wing spot in 2026. And I think that Braydon Hawthorne could lead that charge. So it's not just, he's a guy that can pan out in future seasons. I think screw it. Even if he's not able to put on a ton of muscle, even if he's not able to get stronger, this kid has a really nice jump shot and a lot of things he could bring to the table now that the Wildcats could use in some really important spots and some not so important spots. Throw the kid out there, show him or let him show what he's capable of. I think we're undervaluing Braydon Hawthorne. Let me know what you think in the comments below. Yes, no, maybe. Let me know what you think. If we are undervaluing Hawthorne, maybe we're undervaluing someone else on the roster, in your opinion. All right, I want to get to my 5 personal favorites when it comes to Kentucky tournament games since the start of the Calipari era. You guys are going to, I think, agree with most of these. You might disagree with one in particular. We'll break it all down here in just a second. Before we get to that, though, I want to tell you guys about our friends over at GameTime. Have you ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family? Maybe it's game day and you suddenly realize you actually want to go be in the stands. And that's exactly where GameTime comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. GameTime makes all of that possible. They make buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop the closer you get to your first pitch, and they've got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and a lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. And I can confirm, as somebody that has been using GameTime for years now, whether it be baseball, basketball, football, I've used them to go see all of those different sporting events. The seat views that they have in the app are incredible, and they're even better in person. You will not be disappointed using the GameTime app. They tell you what the prices are of the tickets are up front. They're not going to bamboozle you. It's the cheapest tickets on the market. You will not find better deals elsewhere. It's an incredibly quick process, and right now, you can take the guesswork out of buying your tickets with GameTime. All you have to do, go download the GameTime app, create an account, and then you can use code LOCKEDONCollege to get $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account, redeem code LOCKEDONCollege, LOCKEDONCOLLEGE for $20 off. Download GameTime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. All right, continuing along here on the Wednesday, depending on when you're watching this edition of Locked On Kentucky. Lance Dawe hanging out here with you. Man, I really appreciate you guys checking out the show today. We are in the middle of the offseason. We're about to ramp things back up here in about a week or so, breaking down what's going to happen with the football team. They've got a very difficult task ahead of them. Is Zach Calzada somehow underrated in the SEC in his second stint in the conference? Does Kentucky have enough on the offensive end of the team, of the squad, to go out there and win a bowl game? Get to a bowl game, I should say. Does Mark Stoops have more years in the tank after this season? We're going to be discussing all of that, obviously, SEC Media Days coming up as well. But for now, we're going to talk about Braydon Hawthorne, obviously, and then we're going to talk about my 5 personal favorite Kentucky NCAA Tournament games since the 2009-10 season, a.k.a. the beginning of the John Calipari era. We're going to go 1 to 5 here. And again, a lot of you said you could just put the entire 2014 run on here. Like those could be the best games, which I think is fair. But for me personally, I've only got one game from the 2014 run that was one of my personal 5 favorites. We'll start here with number 1. And it is a game from that 2014 run. And a lot of you may be thinking, oh, it's going to be the Wisconsin game. Maybe you're thinking it's going to be something later on in the run. No, ladies and gentlemen, it is not, in fact, the Louisville game, the Michigan game, the Wisconsin game. I'm taking you to the round of 32. Kentucky over Wichita State, 78-76 on March 23rd, 2014. Why is this my favorite Kentucky NCAA tournament game that I have seen? This is the best back and forth contest I have ever gotten to witness, and it was so fun watching this game as a child. Right around 2014 was when I really started to pay attention to college basketball as a whole and really started to appreciate just what exactly was going on. At the time, I was actually a ball boy for another SEC program. Like I was one of the kids that got on the floor, like cleaning up in between plays and everything. Didn't really appreciate what exactly was going on around me. Looking back on it now, I really do appreciate and I'm thankful for the opportunities that I've gotten and I still get to at least witness some of these games in person and to experience college basketball as a whole, because I think it is a beautiful sport. Jay Billis thinks that if you like college basketball, it's because of an affiliation for some team or some program. Obviously, KY till we die here. But the sport as a whole, I think, is beautiful. And this, I think, is a great example of what this game, what this sport can be. Back and forth, stars, bully ball, physicality, jump shooting. Kentucky would not die in this game, despite Wichita State. Ron Baker knocking down outside shots. You also had Cleanthony Early going for 31 points in this contest. Kentucky could not slow those two guys down. Some of the biggest, I think, like the churning points in this game were some of the lobs and dunks. Julius Randle. You've got Cauley Stein throwing down a dunk in there at some point in the middle of this game. It was so fun rewatching this just a couple of days ago. And seeing some of the explosiveness, the athleticism that the Wildcats had in this early John Calipari era. Dakari Johnson, the Harrison twins, James Young poured in 13 points on this squad. This was essentially At Calipari Staple, a 7-man rotation. You had Jared Polson make an appearance in this game, and I was like, hold on. I completely forgot Jared Polson existed. But this was so fun to watch. This was a joy of a game to experience back then, and it was really fun to rewatch here recently when I was combing over trying to decide what my favorite games were. Obviously, Kentucky there at the end, getting it done. Wichita State in shock. It felt like the broadcast was also kind of in shock there towards the end. After Wichita State was kind of able to, they were fighting back and forth. I think with like 5.5 minutes left, they got up by like 4 or 5 points. Kentucky responds. They're up by 3 with less than a minute, and that was kind of it. Great outside shooting from both these teams. Some really good bully ball from the Wildcats, just driving inside, and you can't stop us. Some dirty, grimy hoops at various points where it's either some really wonky shots at the rim and points are scored on the possession because of an offensive rebound, or just some really gutsy want-to style ball from the Cats. This was so fun. This was a great game. This is a perfect example of what this sport can be at its peak. This was an incredible matchup. Loved the upset, obviously. This was the beginning of the run, and for me, that's my favorite part of it. I understand the Harrison shots later on down the road. I think that for me personally, the Wichita State game does take the cake in this 2014 run. And I feel similarly about different football teams, right? Whenever you go and watch like the way that their season unfolds as underdogs, you don't think about their arrival to whatever SEC championship or whatever national championship game. You want to go back, at least for me, you want to go back to what was the turning point? What was the moment that everything clicked for this squad? And you realize that something special might be brewing. For me, it's whenever you take out number 1 seed, Wichita State in 2014. That's my favorite game. The second game that I have on this list is Kentucky over Louisville in 2012 to head to the national championship game, the Final Four in New Orleans. 69-61 was the final score over the 4th-seeded Cards. Just a prime example of John Calipari having Rick Pitino's number. Physical defense. This game, for me, whenever I think of this 2012 team, the Anthony Davis, Jones, Teague, Lamb, Kid Gilchrist, whenever I think of this squad, I think of the defense first and foremost, how great Anthony Davis was for the team, and I think of this game as a great example of what Davis leading the charge for this defensive-minded squad could be. This was grind you down into a pulp basketball. Louisville shot less than 35% from the floor in this game. Russ Smith shot 4 of 15 in this contest, had 3 turnovers to 1 assist. Wildcats just suffocated Louisville, and despite the fact that they came back at a couple different spots in this game, Wildcats were just too much to handle. Could not stop straight line drives or pick and roll. Anthony Davis had an incredible double-double in this game, finished with 18 points, 14 rebounds, 5 blocks, while shooting 7 of 8 from the floor. Just a peak Anthony Davis performance here. He was a monster. Kentucky was just bigger and better, and this was one of those where it's just like you impose your will and you win and you make it to the national championship. Nobody was stopping this Kentucky team, man. One of the best defensive teams of all time. You talk about how fun that Wichita State game was just because of the jump shooting and the individual like moments of aggression. Man, this was just hard-nosed from start to finish. I really loved the way that this team played ball. And you're going to see, actually, outside of one game, I kind of continue this trend of like lower-ish scoring games where the Wildcats just kind of grind it out at various points. It's kind of ugly. It's kind of grimy. And yet they get it done. We'll take it to the win over Ohio State in 2011 for my third pick here. Number 4, Kentucky 62, number 1, Ohio State 60. The shot from Brandon Knight. You forget how good of a, like, you talk about the physicality, man. You forget how good of a jump shooting team this was. This was a pretty good squad that made it past the 34-3 Buckeyes. Terrence Jones, Josh Harrelson, who came alive in this run, as all of us remember Brandon Knight in this game, decent outside of shooting the ball, obviously. DeAndre Liggins had 15 crucial points. We're going to talk about Liggins, actually, later on this week when we discuss the La Familia squad that's been put together. Really fascinating what La Familia has done, bringing some guys back, adding some new Kentucky players, and also a media personality is going to be on this squad. We'll get to that, obviously. I think a lot of you guys know who that is. Man, this was a fun team to watch. Just a classic Cal, athletic, bully ball of sorts at different times. Josh Harrelson doing some grown man freaking stuff out there, getting past Solinger and the crew. Ohio State only shot 32.8% from the floor. Wildcats 45.8%. Really good from the charity stripe as well. Got out rebounded, but had some crucial second chance opportunities. Really struggled to keep Ohio State off the glass, obviously, with 16 O boards there. But man, this Wildcat squad, talk about, again, just another kind of grimy game at various points where the Cats had to figure it out inside, and they were able to. Josh Harrelson, obviously being the catalyst for so many different things, had 3 blocks, the double-double of 17 points, 10 rebounds. Josh Harrelson's performance in this alone was, I think, a reason to put this here on the list. But also, it's shocking, number 1 overall seed Ohio State. Again, where the broadcast was just Jim Nantz, was just kind of stunned. And I love that stuff, man. I love when Kentucky is the underdog and they find a way to get it done, obviously upsetting Wichita State and then Ohio State here. The Louisville game, nobody was stopping that Wildcat squad. But take you to another game that felt like just a breath of fresh air once it was finally over. The one that just really stressed me out from start to finish. Kentucky versus Houston in 2019. That's my 4th game here on this list. And again, a lot of you are probably screaming, why didn't you put the Louisville win? Why didn't you put the Michigan win? Why didn't you put the Wisconsin win? I think that you could group that 3-game stretch into its own, just kind of, here's my personal favorite. It feels like all of them, or at least the Michigan and Wisconsin game, just felt like kind of the same ending there, obviously, with Harrison hitting those 2 massive shots. I put it here as an honorable mention in my notes because I think that you could just have that on its own. And it's just as good on paper and obviously on video as any of these other 5 games. At the same time, though, this is my personal favorite, the ones that I found the most joy and experience out of watching. And it's the ones where you felt like the challenge was tough. This was a tough assignment. This game was a dogfight, obviously, with Houston and how good they were defensively. It's one of the few times in the last 5, minus this past season, it's one of the few times the last 5 years where I felt like Kentucky grew a lead. They lost it at the end, but they still clutched it out, which is what happened to this one. Kentucky was up by 11 at some point in this game. Houston comes back. They take the lead. Wildcats respond. Tyler Hero with that clutch bucket at the end. Him and Washington were amazing. You go look at the rotations, the way that this game played out. Houston, a lot more to throw at you. Cal going with that 7-8-ish man. It was essentially like a 7.5-man rotation. I know that doesn't exist, but another tight rotation from the Cats where you had to take Washington out for a crucial stretch in the second half. Another great defensive game outside of Brooks, who just was knocking down stuff from the parking lot from start to finish in this game. This was less about the contest, though, and more about the end for me. Again, to go back to what I was saying, you grow a lead, you lose it, and normally that's kind of all she wrote. Kentucky kind of dissipates into thin air whenever that happens. But to be able to clutch it out the way that you did at the end of this game was kind of, again, the breath of fresh air to, oh my gosh, we won. We're going to go to the Elite Eight against a really, really tough Houston team. Love this contest. Another grit, grimy type game. I think Quickly had two clutch buckets in the first half as well. So those are the 4 favorites. And then the last one here was this most recent victory in the postseason. Kentucky over Illinois in 2025. Why does this already make the list for me? This doesn't have to make the list for you. This makes the list for me. It was the first time in this show's history that Kentucky made it past the round of 32. At least while I was doing this show. In 2022, the loss to St. Peter's really sucked. In 2023, that Kentucky team was above average, but was not going to do anything special in the NCAA tournament. And they had the opportunity to get past Kansas State, and they could not come up clutch in the end. You lose to Oakland in the first round in 2024. And for somebody that had been doing the show for 3.5 years at that point, I was exasperated. And I was really tired of going into it, talking with you guys about the build-up, talking with you guys about how this Kentucky team could do it. And then they fell short of even making the Sweet 16 3 straight seasons. It was painful. It was very annoying. The way that the game was coached, the way that the game was managed, the way that the players executed in various spots, it was all just awful. It sucked. And then finally, under Mark Pope, you're able to get it done, beating Illinois and soundly beating Illinois. Getting over the hump was incredible. Kobe Brea blossomed into a more versatile scoring threat than he had been all season. He dropped, 23 points in this contest. In the second half, he had like this 10-point scoring run on his own where they could not stay in front of him. You gave him a screen. He was able to dissect the defense, get around it. He showed off the ball handling. He showed off the touch shooting in the mid-range. And Kentucky was cooking, man. Amari was way more physical in this game, had some nice dunks, had some nice blocks. Lamont Butler made some key outside shots despite being a streaky shooter himself. Made that play, obviously, where he stole the ball after Kentucky turned it over, stole it back. And then Garrison finished an and one late in that game. What felt like was kind of the dagger. Of course, Illinois, with their three-point shooting, they came back. They made it close, but Kentucky was collected. They were calm. They were poised. They looked like they were locked in from the jump. It was a complete game from a team that had not shown stability in the NCAA tournament for, at that point, what was well over 6 years. You had the 5 years of Calipari where they didn't make it past the round of 32. And the year in 2019, talk about that Houston game. It's the last game. Kentucky won in the Sweet 16 for 5 straight seasons. This, for me, was just to be able to finally get past a massive roadblock. As somebody that has been covering the team now with 17,000 plus of you subscribed to this channel, watching what I have to say, me going back and forth with you guys, it was nice to finally get that off our backs, to get that victory. I was in Dallas, Texas, actually, while this was happening. I was helping as an assistant producer for Locked On as we were doing NCAA tournament coverage with Amazon. And I was sitting in this newsroom with people like Monique Billings of the WNBA, Gordon Hayward, y'all know who that is, our Locked On crew, some different folks from Tegna. And it was the most nerve-wracking experience of my life. I remember vividly, I can feel it now, just the pit in my stomach from start to finish. And just knowing, like, if we can just hold on, we're better than them, we can win this game. And the fear, every time they made a shot, I was just so nervous. And that huge explosion in the second half offensively where it felt like they could not miss. It was great. It was a great game. It makes the top 5 for me because of what it means to me for this channel, what it means for me for my job, and just the surroundings that I was in. It was surreal getting to work with everybody at Locked On, and then to be able to also at the same time kind of fan out in the corner. It was pretty cool. It was pretty cool. So those are my 5 favorite NCAA tournament games from the Wildcats since the beginning of the Calipari era. That's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Kentucky. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On UK. You can follow me on Twitter at LanceDawe_, and follow the show over on Instagram That is at Kentucky Podcast. Any questions, comments, concerns, leave those in the YouTube comments below. Hit me on the socials. I will see you all tomorrow for another episode. Have a great rest of your day. And of course, God bless.